Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for part two of our webinar series, Bridging the Gap Between Youth, Families, and Law Enforcement, presented by the New Jersey Alliance of Family Support Organizations. If you are just entering the room, we are asking that you please keep your devices on mute. We are waiting for other attendees to join the room, and thank you for being patient. We will begin shortly. While we're waiting for some more participants to enter the room, we'd like you to please take a few minutes to familiarize yourself with the chat by entering your name and location in the chat box. If you would like to be placed on our email list, you may send me a message privately. My name is Penelope Griffin, and I am with the Family Support Organization of Hunterdon, Somerset, and Warren County. If you have any questions for the panel, please place it in the chat box in the form of a question. We'll do our best to answer as many as possible. So once again, thank you and thank you for being patient, and we will begin shortly. Good evening. If you're just entering the room, we're asking that you please keep your devices on mute. We are still waiting for other attendees to enter the room, so thank you for being patient, and we will begin shortly. Good evening, everyone. If you're just entering the room, we will begin shortly. We're just waiting for a few more people to enter the room. So we'll begin shortly, and thank you for being patient. Good evening, everyone. We're still waiting for attendees to enter the room. We're asking that you please keep your devices on mute. Thank you for being patient with the start process, and we will begin the webinar in 3 minutes. Good evening, everyone. We're still waiting for some attendees to enter the room. We will begin in 2 minutes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for part 2 of our webinar series, Bridging the Gap Between Youth, Families, and Law Enforcement, presented by the New Jersey Alliance of Family Support Organizations. We're asking that you please keep your devices on mute. Tonight's webinar topic is what to do when having encounters with police officers. My name is Penelope Griffin, Community Outreach Specialist for the Family Support Organization of Hunterdon, Somerset, and Warren counties, and I will be monitoring tonight's chat. Please take a few minutes to familiarize yourself with the chat by entering your name and location in the chat box. If you would like to be placed on our email list, you may send me your email address privately. If you have a question for the panel, please place it in the chat box in the form of a question. We will do our best to get as many questions answered as possible. If you have a personal question for the panel, please send it to me privately along with your email address, and we will have a reply for you as soon as possible from our panel. I want to thank you again for joining us, and now I'm going to pass this over to Jessica Santiago, who is the Children's System of Care Coordinator for the New Jersey Alliance of Family Support Organizations. Jessica?
Good evening, everyone. Before we get started, I would like to thank Ms. Carol Russell and Sheriff Rochelle Bilal for joining us this evening during our What to Do When Having Encounters with Police Officers webinar. I also would like to thank the Family Support Organization outreach coordinators, especially those that worked on the committee to put this webinar series together, the New Jersey Alliance of Family Support Organizations, my Executive Director, Dr. DeLacy Davis, all of the Family Support Organization Executive Directors, and all of you for attending today's webinar. For the past few months, outreach coordinators from all over the state of New Jersey came together to work on a webinar series that focused on educating the community about mental health and interactions with law enforcement. The goal of these webinars is to bridge the gap that currently exists between the community and law enforcement and to provide solutions to reducing conflict between police and the community and their encounters. Ground rules for this evening's webinar is that we will respect each other's opinion. There will be no put downs, no shutdowns, and hopefully no letdowns. In achieving our goals, we understand that everyone is approaching this group from their perspective. In an effort to bridge the gap, we will borrow a line from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Let us all seek first to understand, then to be understood. Thank you, and I'll hand it over to you, Lori.
Thanks, Jess. My name is Lori Scarpino. I'm sorry, there's some feedback. I am the Community Outreach Coordinator for Ocean County Family Support Organization, and I would like to thank all of you for taking the time out to be with us tonight to talk about this really important topic, bridging the gap between youth, families, and law enforcement, second part of our series. And I would especially like to thank our 2 panelists tonight. We have Carol Russell, who is the Community Outreach Coordinator for Union County. She's also a former acting police director and a retired police sergeant. It is also my great pleasure to introduce Sheriff Rochelle Bilal, the first elected female and African-American sheriff in Philadelphia. Thank you both for taking the time out of your busy schedules and being here with us tonight to help us reach our community and talk about how to build these relationships in our community. Thank you both so much.
Thank you for having us, Lori. Thank you.
So I believe, Jessica, we're going to be opening up tonight with a panel,
A polling question.
A polling question, sorry.
All right, so I'll be launching a polling question for all participants. So it should pop up on your screen. So the first question is, have you ever been stopped by the police? Yes or no? And then if you answered yes to the previous question, how was your experience? Positive, neutral, negative, not applicable. I will leave the poll open for 50 more seconds. Okay. So the results, have you ever been stopped by the police? 92% said yes, 8% no. And if you had answered yes to the previous question, how was your experience? 25% said positive, 53% neutral, 22% negative, and 8% not applicable. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to move into our topics and questions. So the 2 of you can share your collective knowledge and experience with us tonight. Thank you again. So we're going to start out with, when we're talking about having encounters with police, whether it's in a vehicle, walking, standing on the street, in the community, school, or a home or residence. What are some of our rights as residents and community members?
You want me to speak, Carol? Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm Rochelle Bilal. I'm the sheriff of the city of Philadelphia, but I'm more than just that. I spent 27 years in the Philadelphia Police Department, also the public safety director in Calvin Borough, and what you can call a activist cop. So let me give you my little perspective on what to do and how to deal with some of these things. I grew up in Philadelphia, and I grew up in North Philadelphia. So you can imagine we did not have a good relationship with the police department coming up. So I take that experience in with me with everything that I do. And once I decided to be a police officer, my lifelong mission was to change that image in dealing with the police people, because the people that recruited me said, if you want to change it, you got to be the change you want to see. So walking, driving, in your home, there are so many things that can come into a county with police that most of the time you may have good ones and some you may have bad. But out of all of them, the one thing you really want to do is to survive. And so some of the things we may be talking about tonight is how do you survive a police encounter? What do you do when you come into encounter with police? I think I said earlier, I'm not gonna say it this time, I'm say, when you are walking or driving, see, I'm being nice now, ladies. When you are walking or driving anywhere, what you want to do is remain calm, is to be silent. I'm not gonna say that, is to be silent and pay attention to who is stopping you for whatever reason. You wanna be able to win how we used to say it, Carol, you wanna be able to, you can lose a battle, but you wanna be able to win the war. And
Right.
by paying
Pick your
attention,
battles.
by paying attention, you wanna be able to pay attention to who's stopping you. You wanna see if you can get a badge number. You wanna see if you get the car number. The car is a direct relationship to the person who's stopping you. Because as police officers, we get assigned that vehicle. And so that vehicle identifies who we are. So even if you don't get a name, even if they don't want to give you a badge number, you want to be able to get the car number, the vehicle number, because that relates you to the person that's stopping you. You want to be able to not get into a verbal encounter with a police person. Now, as a young person, I got into them verbal encounters, and at that point, you do not win. You do not win right then. You can get that information and win later, but at this point, like I said from the beginning, you want to be able to survive. So get that information, pay attention, do not get into any verbal, because I know we have street lawyers, you're going to dictate what the rules and regulations is and what your constitutional rights may be, but that may not be the time. You have to be able to pick and choose your battles. And one with an encounter with the police officer, especially if you don't know if that's a good cop or a bad cop. There's so many things that play into that. In a vehicle, you want to be able to be calm. Walking on the streets, you may ask, why is you stopping me? I have my rights. I don't have to give you nothing. And that may be true. But can you find out if that's a good cop or a bad cop? A bad cop, if you start verbaling your rights and the right to remain silent and the right to talk and tell people and go back and forth, you may not survive that encounter if that's a bad cop. But because you don't know which one is which, you need to remain calm. You need to collect that information, and you need to be able to get out of that area safely. I'll let my partner Carol join in on this one.
Oh, once again, you took it all, Ro, pretty much. And for everybody who is on this webinar, I want to start off with first thanking you for joining us. I am a retired sergeant from the Trenton Police Department, and I also was called back by the mayor during my retirement to come back as the acting police director for a period of time. So just understanding the nomenclature of policing and how it works for your benefit, and in regards to this webinar, what to do when you're being stopped, when you have an encounter, when the police come to your home, if you are a person in school and a police officer stops you in school, you have your rights. And what you need to do is really infuse yourself with all the information that is so readily available for you. The information, it's public information. Everyone, just about everyone, is either on a phone here or a computer. The information is on the internet, and you need to be knowledgeable of that information. You need to know your rights. Know what you can, cannot, should, and should not do. Rochelle and I, along with Dr. Davis and multiple officers, we traveled the country putting this exact seminar on for communities, for schools, for universities on what to do when stopped by the police. For everyone on here and those even who are not, your lens, everyone's lens is different on how they see the police, how they view the police, how the police police their community, what the police look like in an urban community versus a suburb versus a rural community. Policing across the board is pretty much the same, but the way the police is all different. And you need to be, as the community, you need to be cognizant of that. Some things that I do in the city, I'm not going to do riding through the suburb. I'm just not going to. I'm going to change. We talk about, and we'll talk about it further into this seminar, but we talk about code switching. You do that when you're going through different communities. There are just ways that you have to present yourself, as Sheriff Bilal mentioned. And one thing you don't want to do, you don't want to hold court on the street. You want to remain calm. You want to be respectful. You want to be polite. It's yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Some cops may feel you're being overly polite, but that is the correct thing to do. That's the correct way to handle yourselves. So as Rochelle said, you want to be able to win that war. So you have to learn to pick your battles. You want to get away with all your limbs intact. And even if you did have an encounter with that bad cop, so to speak, you want to be able to tell about it later. We know so many scenarios that go south and they go bad. And everybody later on is just trying to figure it out. What happened? How did it all go wrong? So Rochelle pretty much gave you what you need to know. You really need to know your rights. You don't want to be loud. You want to stay calm. You don't want to do a back and forth. You may have an encounter again with that bad cop. One of the wrong things you might do is ask them, so what's your badge number? What's your name? Really? Oh, we're going down that road? And that might be their mindset. You have no idea what policing entails on a daily, how it wears on you, and what that officer is bringing to work with him or her that day. So they could be in a very good mood, but then they could be in a really bad mood. And guess what? As soon as they go and get into their vehicle, they're going to take it out possibly on the first driver they see. Now, that's not always the case, but it can go south in that direction. So we just want you to, stay in a positive and stay down that route of keeping yourself safe, because that is the ultimate goal for the police, for the individuals that they're stopping, and for the entire community and its as a whole. Safety is imperative, and safety is number one.
Let me add into that. When one of the questions is, what are your rights? You have a lot of rights, but the best person to argue your rights would be you. And the other best person to argue your rights would be your lawyer. You want to be able to tell your lawyer if there's a situation that is not good. And so you have to be there to do that. If you get into an encounter with a police officer because you are a street lawyer and you got all these rights that you know of, which you do have, who's going to tell them for you? Nobody's there but you and the police officers. Who's going to tell them for you? So those are the things you need to pay attention to. Those are the things you need to, as I constantly say, grab that information. And situations, one of the questions you're asking, when do you remain silent and when do you talk? I say you remain silent all the time until you get out of there. Now, once you're out of there, you could talk all day. You could tell your mother, you could tell your father, you could tell your attorney, you could tell the community, you could tell everybody. Once you are safe, you can tell everybody. You don't have to remain silent at all. But a lot of times silence is golden until you can understand what type of situation you are in. And that's the biggest issue here. You got to be able to determine who you are dealing with, because you don't know them and the police do not know you. And so they react on certain situations they've dealt with. And so they may approach you, you may think it's abrasive, but they're only protecting themselves because they don't know who you are. They don't know what you may have. They don't know how you coming at them. So they may come with a gun on their hand, and we taught when we walk up to cars, we got to be ready because we don't know who's in that car. But you don't know whether they're a good one or a bad one. So everybody needs to remain calm in that area to keep everybody safe, even the police officer.
Understand that human factors weigh in on both sides. You know, I don't, the communities, I guess, perceive the police like they're this mechanical machine, and they're human as well. So understand something that is in them, it's also in you. Those human factors, the human factor of fear, the human factor of anxiety, the adrenaline. When officers stop a vehicle, just imagine them stopping a vehicle. Let's take it at night and the windows are tinted like midnight black. The anxiety is raised to 100 for a police officer. They don't know who's in the vehicle. They don't know what they have. They don't know if they have weapons or not. So what you want to do is, we'll say in a motor vehicle stop, you want to lower that anxiety. You want to illuminate your vehicle. You want to always keep your hands visible. And you want to be polite, respectful, and remain calm. And the one thing you don't want to do on a stop, you don't want to get out of your vehicle. Never get out of your vehicle. You remain in your vehicle until the officer approaches. I don't care if he keeps you there for a half hour. Just be mad in your car for a half hour. But that half hour could save your life.
Thank you, Sheriff Bilal and Carol. That was really a lot of information and such valuable information. Jessica, would you like to post another polling question?
Yes, so I will be launching the second polling question. The question is, if you were stopped by the police, why were you stopped? Traffic violation, I called for emergency services, unprovoked encounter, community disturbance, or other. I will leave the survey up for about 40 more seconds. I'm going to end the polling. 53 out of 71 responded, and the results are 81% said traffic violation, 4% said I called for emergency services, 11% stated it was an unprovoked encounter, 4% community disturbance, and 13% other. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to move into the next topic, and that is, when you are stopped by a police officer, what do they have the right to stop you for and ask you for, or your passengers or guests?
You can be stopped for a multitude of situations, and none of them necessarily related to anything that you have done. They can be related to something you have done, traffic violators, that they can stop you for. But if a police is out there in their vehicle and they're working, they can get a radio call. You know they made more than one Toyota, right? Oh, let me stop. They made more than one Range Rover. Oh, hold up. They made more than one Cadillac. That's what I'm saying. There is more than one person driving the same car. And if a police officer is in a vehicle, they get a call and say, black Cadillac, spinning wheels with those rims on it, traveling north in a certain location, just robbed grandma, took a pocketbook and knocked her down. So now, if you in one of those cars that other people may be driving, that's a reason why they can stop you because of that. And also descriptions. If you are in a situation that the police get that information, they don't know that you're not the person. They're going on a description that they get a call into a radio. They may say you're tall, skinny, wearing a blue t-shirt, Timbs and jeans. Maybe turn around and say you got a really nice suit on, haircut sharp, Stacey Adams shoes, walking down the street. They don't know you. All they're dealing with is the radio call and information that they are receiving. They can stop you. You may not be the person, but that needs to be determined, because otherwise, if you are the person, then they need to be able to deal with you, because grandma needs her pocketbook back and we need to get the person that took it. So these are situations where you can be stopped. And if you are in a vehicle, it all depends on the information that is received as to whether they can get everybody's information. So if you're talking about a radio call coming out on a bank robbery, 5 people in a car, you in that car that fits that description, all 5 of y'all are going to be checked, because that's the information that they received. And so they can check all of you out until they're sure or comfortable that you are not the person. As we keep saying this, what you're going to realize is police have limited information. Now, some may make up stuff. Now, we do have some that do that. And that's the ones you want to stay away from and get away from, so you can report them. And it's good that you may be able to do that. But because of the limited information they get to operate off of, if you are not the person, you need to remain calm to ensure that you let them know you're not the person, not verbally. Because once they open up the car, these 5 people, and the description is 5 men in the car, and 2 of them had masks on. They opened up the car. None of y'all got masks on. None of y'all got the physical description of that information they got. None of y'all got the color shoes or the color sweater that they have on. That should be enough to determine that you are not the person. Good cop would say, okay, they're not the ones. Sorry to bother you. We got a call. We're just checking it out. And the car fit the description, but none of y'all do. And you're on your way. That situation can go totally left if they stop you and the first thing you start doing is screaming out your rights. Oh, you ain't got the right to stop me. And then everybody else in the car starts playing that same tune, and now you got a situation that can go totally left. And as we keep saying here tonight, you want to be safe. You want to be safe. You want to be able to leave that situation and go home. And if the cops was out of line, you want to be able to report that situation. Because if you report it, that information goes on the record, and enough of those people will start looking at their police officers as their behavior out in our communities. Carol?
Yes, and just to touch on that, I think Rochelle and I, we probably talked about this previously. With that information that she just gave you, you could be doing everything right. We'll say, again, we're going to stay in the vehicle lane. You could be in a vehicle and be doing everything correct. Your vehicle maintenance is good. Your driver's license is good. Your registration is good. Insurance. And they won't know that really about your insurance until they stop you and ask for your insurance card. But those are some of those 3 things they have the absolute right to ask you for. when they do stop you. Now, again, you may have not even committed an infraction, but you have some passengers in your vehicle. You rode past maybe the police, and the passenger in your vehicle is wanted for a homicide. Possibly. We could go with a whole bunch of scenarios tonight. But the police can stop you for a multitude of things. So just, keep that in mind, but then keep in mind the things we've said prior to all these encounters. Your stop may not even be in a motor vehicle. It may be on the street. So do and it's like you're juggling. Do you want to give them limited information? Do you want to give them everything they're asking for? You have to understand everyone has what they taught us in the academy about a sixth sense. And my belief is everyone's born with one. And you know what that sixth sense is? That gut. And your gut feeling talks to you. So with that being said, when you're out there on the street, your gut speaks to you. And it starts telling you, should I or should I not? Because you can feel the energy, you can feel what's going on. And you could be the best person out there. You could just be walking to the corner store and get caught up in some nonsense that's going on out there, and you weren't doing anything wrong. So again, do you want to make this a battle or a war? So you may want to give them the information and just know, okay, how far are they going with this questioning? And you can ask and politely, officer, am I under arrest? Or am I wanted for anything? Because it's a feeling that you start getting that it's feeling like you're starting to interrogate me a bit much right here. So just keep all of that in mind. All the scenarios, we can play with the scenarios all day. We can just all evening long, we can go with this scenario, that scenario, but you definitely want to know your rights, you do. But as Rose said, you don't want to start throwing that out there to the officer, oh, I know my rights. Okay, well, know them, but you can know them and still cooperate and give enough information to be able to, okay, the officer's like, okay, you can move along. Now, what I want to keep in mind, and that's not with every municipality, but I can only speak from the municipality I worked for and how what the protocol was when you are stopped. One thing you want to keep in mind is if you are stopped, there's a possibility of your information being collected. And we would do what is called an FIR. I'm not going to leave you with just that acronym. I'm going to tell you what that is. That's a field interview report. And what's on that is for the purposes of the department. The officer was out there, they were conducting some type of investigation. They stopped an individual. They may have asked you for your ID. You may have given it to them, you may have not. You may have even given them a name and the name's not your correct name. But the information that you give us, we're going to take that information down. So you be mindful of that as well. We are going to take your information and it may never come up again. But again, police don't know who they're dealing with at all times. And we may have an encounter sometime later on down the road. And there is your information. So be mindful of that as well. And it's not all for bad or good on either side. It's not a bad thing, and it can be good. You could be that helpful witness. You may have wound up being a witness and being questioned. So again, we can go back and forth with this, pretty much all night. So just be mindful.
Just note that when people start asking you something where you start to feel uncomfortable, your personal information, you don't have to get that up. And I say these to women because some people start asking you stuff that you can feel very uncomfortable. You don't have to get that information up.
You
That's
don't.
when you really pay attention to who's asking you those questions. So basic, your name, driver's license, registration in the car, fine. Where you coming from, maybe you do or maybe you don't. It all depends on where you are at this time. You got to look at also where they stop you at. You don't want anybody stopping you on a dirt road. It's just you and two other police officers that you don't know who they are and they don't know who you are. Any event that you need to drive to a lighted location where there may be cameras, where there may be other people at, so that you can feel secure, you can always do that. Just don't do it in a high rate of speed to the gas station. Take your time. Ride to somewhere that's brighter. Don't leave yourself in the dark. And can a cop stop you while your vehicle is parked in the parking spot? Let me tell you, it happened to me. Yeah, happened to me. I'm in a parking spot. You gonna pull me over? My car ain't even moving. I would be screaming that. My car ain't even moving. How you gonna stop me? Well, it's that description of that vehicle that a lot of us drive. They don't know if you just pulled in there or you've been there. But that's the first thing that I'll be screaming. Why you going? My car ain't moving no more. You can't stop me. I'm already stopped. It's just the vehicle and that description. And you can determine that, or you can basically communicate that with the police. And they basically can tell that that car has been there and you're not the person. But those are the things that you scream about because I did it. Just be careful. It's only the vehicle. And we all drive Range Rovers. I'm at Cadillac. What you got? Toyota? We all do.
I believe someone had a question.
Yes, we do have actually two questions. So the first question is, so if you can you keep on driving to a police station? Is that something that someone would want to think about doing?
If you do
Are you
not
talking about when you're stopped? Once
So
you-
if you're being pulled over, I'm taking a jab that if you're being pulled over and you're being stopped, can you just proceed to a police station?
somebody already said not unless you want to be potentially
charged
charged
with
with
eluding.
illegal.
Yes.
They'll probably charge you with eluding. Again, it's about pulling to the safest place. Not knowing if, I mean, if you're in a city, if you're in a suburb, a rural area, and me personally, and I would take it, let me go to the rural area. If I'm being stopped by the police or followed and they put their lights on, I'm gonna do my best to get to a lit area. I will probably go slow. I may turn, illuminate my interior so they can at least get a visual inside my vehicle and get to somewhere that is lit, at least maybe a store, a convenience store or somewhere, especially if I'm by myself. Now, if I have someone in the car, some people in the car, I may stop. And again, that's a judgment call. And it depends on where you are and your comfortability. I mean, some people may be comfortable. I might not feel comfortable in a particular neighborhood being stopped and it's pitch black and I'm by myself. What I may even do is call my bestie, get them on the phone and keep the line open. Tell them where I am. In case you don't hear from me in an hour, call somebody or come for me.
Carol, how about calling 911 to inform them that you don't feel safe?
You
Is
can
that an
do that.
option?
You can do that.
Matter of fact, you can, let me just say this, like we keep saying, you want to be able to, you can lose a battle and win the war. You could fight an eluding charge.
Mhm.
First of all, for you to elude the police, you got to be driving at a high rate of speed. If you driving 10 miles an hour, just try to get up to that gas station that has cameras because you don't feel safe, then let them write you the ticket for the eluding. They got to be able to explain what that was. And you as an individual will be able to explain why.
Mhm.
So, those are one of the things you have to take on the chin. An
Absolutely.
eluding charge, there is eluding in my city. You have to be actually trying to escape the police.
Mm,
Nobody tries to escape the police going 10 miles an hour.
mm.
They are speeding. So those one of them things you may look at taking that on the chin and, and,
Gotcha.
and getting in court for that ticket and explaining as to why.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So a lot of people who are attending this webinar tonight have youth who happen to have developmental, emotional, intellectual challenges. And so are there any tips that a parent who may be driving with a youth who has these challenges, or maybe a youth advising a youth who may have some type of disability, what advice can you give to them for when being pulled over by the police?
If the person with the challenge is possibly a passenger, are you saying?
So if let's say the child has a challenge and the adult is the parent or caregiver is driving, and the
Okay.
youth has a challenge and they are triggered by police or lights or things like that, or maybe even if you have a child who has ADHD, is driving age, and has that same trigger. So, what is maybe some advice we could give parents who may have youth who are getting ready to drive, or have youth that they have to drive with those disabilities? What advice can we give to them?
Well, I would probably have some type of, maybe a decal of some type, to alert the officer, or a card, a bracelet. Upon being stopped, you can explain to the officer. We don't know what the stop would even be for, but officer, my child has whatever the challenge is it possible that you lower your lights? You can ask. That's not saying that the officer will do it. And those lights pretty much have to be lit for that officer's safety as well, out on the road when they're stopping you.
That's one of the things that, if you are living in a certain area, and because our adult children that may be dealing with some disability issues, that you want to go in and talk to the chief of police. That's a community issue that you want to get everybody to work together on. And if your child is driving, because we don't know what that issue is, let's come up with a way that the police can be identified without having anybody's personal information, but they can identify that this vehicle is being driven by somebody that may have a disability. Like you see handicap tags, somebody's in their disability. You may come up with that decal within your community and your police department, where that could be on the vehicle, and the police are trained as to what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, when they see that, they say, oh, somebody's in there with a disability. They don't know what it is. Let me just back off on these bright lights. Let me go up here on a calm manner. Let me not be aggressive so quickly, because now we understand that people operate vehicles even when they have a disability.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't stop them from driving. And they're young, and it doesn't stop them, and they can get agitated. So those type of things you may want to work out in the community. Have a conversation with your chief of police. Let them know that you live there, and what you want to do is educate the police that, this decal here, you may even develop it. This means that my child that drives has a disability, and if you want to explain what it is, that will be up to you. And so that they can train the cops, and they will be able to know what that is on their approach. Those are the things you work with your community on.
Got you. So while I just want to point out, anyone, if you have questions, please put them in the comment box, in the chat box. You could also chat to me directly. So we want to be able to answer as many questions as we possibly can for you this evening. So you could go back into your communities and relay this to the parents and the youth that you serve, or maybe you even use this for personal use as well. So I think we spoke about this maybe a little bit in our last webinar, but are there any type of like guides or protocols out there that like somebody can carry on them or what to do? Is that another thing that people will have to go back in their community and ask for in their community?
I didn't hear what you said. Say that again.
So is there
What do you
yeah,
mean?
like
What to
is there
do?
like a palm card or chart or anything that somebody could use to carry on them? Is there anything available like that in communities? Is there something like that in your community, Ms. Rochelle? Or
Oh, yeah.
uh,
Oh, yeah. Carol and I, like she
Well,
said, we traveled around the country
mm-hmm,
on doing what to do when stopped by police.
mm-hmm,
Sergeant DeLacy Davis, let me not do that. Dr. Sergeant DeLacy Davis developed that pamphlet and that a curriculum a long time ago on what to do when stopped by police,
mm-hmm,
and being a part of a national organization. And so all our local chapters basically began to copy that format and develop those pamphlets to give out to young people as to what to do when stopped by police. So those are available, and we can give those to people, and people can take it back into their community, or they can contact Carol or Dr. Sergeant DeLacy Davis.
mm-hmm,
And we travel, and we also go to different schools to basically work with young people on what to do when stopped by police. And we do it in an avenue which we sort of like do little skits, like when you're driving in the car with all your friends. We do the good cop, we do the bad cop.
the
When
role
you're standing
play.
on the corner with the music,
mm-hmm,
we do the good cop, we do the bad cop. And our pamphlets tell you what to do when stopped by police. And we had a little black book at one time that we were giving out that we used to give to young people to keep so they can document the car number. They can document what the badge number was. If they caught the name, they can document it in that book. And then it tells them who they can report it to after the incident if they felt as though they were violated. So yes, there are those items, and I think we can probably conjure them up and get them to you, and
mm-hmm.
families can have them.
Yeah. Yeah. So another thing that comes to mind while we're waiting for some more questions, we do have some people asking, where do you get the autism decal? And then we have a response that NAMI may have palm cards for reference. So getting the autism decal, is that simply like basically going out to your local Autism Alliance and asking for, seeing that they have those available or possibly a grant available to get those?
That is something that can be done. And they also basically can even start that communication with their police department
Mm-hmm.
by going in there, educating them on those decals, because some may not know, and all may not know.
Great. So another thing that comes to mind when we're thinking about police, and you mentioned about this a little bit earlier in your discussion, is that there are instances where there are not so desirable police stops, and so now we're able to document that. What is, because we have cell phones, we have ways to document these things more accurately, or what happened. So, and you mentioned earlier to stay in your car and to be calm and to follow your own inner protocol of maybe getting out of the situation the best way possible. But is there a good time to maybe use your cell phone, or what would be that time? What would that time be, and how do you feel about that at being in law enforcement?
Carol?
How do I feel about it being in law enforcement?
Well, how do you feel about it as as a former law or in law enforcement? How do you feel? Do you feel that using video helps, assists in discovering when things don't go so right in police stops?
Well, a lot of people are going to use cell phones. You may get stopped and the officer is uncomfortable with you videotaping. I was never uncomfortable, because if you're doing things justly, the right way, you can tape me all day long. You can record me all day long. It's those that don't want anything that they might do, a little, nefarious or unjust, they don't want being seen.
Yes.
So they don't want you recording. Record me. I'm going to do what I can. And most officers should be able to think with that mindset. I think if they know they're being watched,
Mhm.
and I'm not saying be more careful, you're going to do what you're supposed to do, and you're going to do it right. You have no problem being recorded.
Great.
And again, that's up to each individual officer. I mean, officers a lot of times being recorded and they don't know they're being recorded.
Yes.
So that's how we wind up, and then some are being recorded and still doing the wrong thing, and they don't care.
Yeah.
So
You can record any police officer. It is not against the law. You hear me? It is not against the law. You can record any police officer out there doing their job. I teach up at the police academy on what can cost you, the police officers, their career. These are the recruits going through the stages where they are trying to be a police. And I teach the course called What Can Cost You Your Career. And one of the things I say to them is cameras are everywhere. Cameras are everywhere. And then police officers need to get out of that car and act like they on Candid Camera. Some of y'all might not be old enough to know what that is, but act like they on Candid Camera and that you are being filmed for a model, or you're being filmed for a show. Jump out of there with your hat, straighten your collar, smile, because cameras are everywhere and everybody has the right. If you feel unsafe, pull it out. Put camera in your car. I have one that can just flip around to watch anybody at any time. You can video people. What you don't want to do, where you can cause a confrontation by pulling out that camera and putting it up in somebody's face. Yeah, I'm videotaping you. Not. You don't want to do that. First of all, that's somebody's personal space. You're not going to get in my personal space with a camera. That's not happening. That's what you don't want to do. If you got to videotape them from a distance, videotape them. You can't videotape them or walk up to a crime scene and say, now I'm going to videotape all of that. You can't do certain things. If there's tape around and you can video from on the other side of that tape, you videotape. But there's certain things you cannot do. And one of the things you don't want to do is get up in a police officer, get in a personal space, throwing that phone up top of now and I'm videotaping you. That can be a problem. You may be able to report it, but that can be a problem. That's why majority of the departments have cameras on police. That's not only for your protection, but it's also for theirs. So videotaping is not against the law.
Thank you. So before I go back into some of our questions, I'm going to hand this back over to Lori because I understand that she has some other questions to bring up.
Yeah, we had a few other topics. Jessica, did you want to do a polling first?
Yes, so we're going to go on to our third polling question. So the question is, the presence of police in my community make me feel safe, protected, anxious, scared, or threatened? And then please select the area in which you reside, North Jersey, Central Jersey, or South Jersey, or out of state. I'll keep the poll up for 40 more seconds, and then I'll end it. Okay, we have 53 that answered out of 68. So the results are 32% safe, 34% said protected, 26% said anxious, 4% said scared, and 4% said threatened. In our audience today, we have 23% from North Jersey, 53% from Central Jersey, 21% from South Jersey, and 4% from out of state. Thank you.
Thank you. So To move into our next topic, one of the questions is, are there any questions that the police ask you that you don't have to answer? And do you have to answer the question, do you know why I stopped you today?
Say that again?
Does the police officer have to ask you why, if you know why they stopped you?
Ask us?
Yeah,
Or do you mean, do they have to answer when we ask, officer, why
Yes.
you stopping me?
yes.
Well, they should. Whether they have to, probably not, but I think they should. And again, it depends on the municipality, depends on the officer, depends on the mood. Do I feel like telling you that? Maybe I want to get all the information I can from you first. But one thing you know, of course, they're going to ask you more than likely to present your driver's license, registration, and insurance card. That's going to be asked. And they may just come to the vehicle and ask you those 3 questions before they volunteer and tell you why you stopped. There's been times an officer, they will stop you and you'll say, officer, can you tell me why you're stopping me? No, I need your driver's license, registration, and insurance card. You may get that. So you want to be prepared, especially driving. You know they're going to ask for that because those are the 3 credentials you must have in order to be operating a vehicle on the road. So be prepared to answer that. And
additionally, to add on to that, if you, especially, you know, those of us out here that do have young drivers on the road, you know, and they're packing those kids into the cars as much as they can. Is there any questions that the police are not allowed to ask the passengers of the vehicle?
I think that's like a situation because we can say certain things they can and certain things that they can't. The one thing they can ask you, that your boyfriend or your girlfriend. It's none of their business. That's the one thing. But you don't want to say that to them. You don't want to say it's none of your business. But that's something like you really, a police officer, that's not part of their report or their situation. Unless it's a circumstance that they're dealing with. Because if they get in a call saying somebody was abducted and you driving that car and there's a little girl in that car, that's a question they need to ask. Who is that? Who is that to you? So it depends on the circumstances that whether what they can and cannot ask. That's not a blanket question that we can answer. But you know, the circumstances will determine what they can and cannot ask you. Anything personal pertaining to you, if you're the only person driving in that car and you feel uncomfortable answering it, then you don't have to answer. Your lawyer will tell you, don't incriminate yourself. So if they say to you, do you know why I'm stopping you? Incriminating yourself and say, yeah, because I'm drunk. No, see, that you don't do. You just say, why are you stopping me? I don't know, officer. And move on to the next question. But just be careful as to how you're answering these questions when you're dealing with certain situations.
Thank you. And so moving into the next topic, when do officers have the right to search your home or vehicle? And are there instances where you can refuse?
When they have the right to do that? When they have a search warrant. When they have a search warrant, and if it's exigent circumstance, I mean, it's an emergency. When in your house, in order for them to just come into your house, they need a search warrant. You have to be able to articulate to a judge why you're entering somebody's house. Search warrant for your house or an arrest warrant for a person. Now, if somebody's outside doing something and the cops see them and they start chasing them and they run into your house, that's the time they can run into your house without a search warrant. And the person that ran in there is the one that brought them in there. Vehicles, they cannot search your car unless they have a search warrant. Unless you want to give them permission to search your car. Now, they can
or
always
if they see something in plain view. If they see a weapon in plain view, they can search your vehicle. But now the locked areas, they have to get a search warrant.
Right, but if they see something in plain view, is there a gun sitting on a chair, they can go in there and retrieve it. But to tear your car up, they still need a search warrant. They have to have a search warrant to do those things, unless you want to give them a consent to search.
Right.
Some people who aren't doing anything, and it's more than one person, and they say, can I search your car? Don't forget, it's that car that everybody has one like, and the call comes in, this black car had just grabbed somebody's pocketbook. I like grandma's pocketbook. Just grabbed the pocketbook and they threw it in the trunk. Now they stopped this car and they say, we got this call. Can we search your trunk? And they say, why you want to search my trunk? Because the person that stole grandma's pocketbook was told that they threw it in the trunk. I said, okay, you can go ahead. They give you consent. You can open up the trunk. Pocketbook not there. That's it. So they can give consent. It's just when there is not consent, you driving on the highway and they're saying, pull you over and say, get out the car because I'm going to search your car. Well, you got to get a search warrant to get that. You got to get a search warrant to get in somebody's pocketbook. You have to get a search warrant if there's no exigent circumstances that will allow you to do any of that. Search warrant, search warrant, search warrant. They can articulate to a judge why they want to search anything that you have, then that's what they would need to do.
Okay, thank you so much. Jessica, did you want to jump into another polling question before we turn it over to the questions in the chat? I understand there's plenty of questions out there for our panelists.
Yes, so we're going to go to our fourth polling question. The question is, do you feel like your local police department has a good relationship with the community they serve? Yes, no, or somewhat. Based on your previous answer, do you feel that it impacts the outcomes in situations where police presence is necessary? Yes, no, or somewhat. I'll leave the question up for 30 more seconds. Okay, we have 50 attendees that responded out of 67. I'm going to end the polling right now and share the results. So do you feel that your local police department has a good relationship with the community they serve? 37% said yes, 24% said no, 39% said somewhat. Based on your previous answer, do you feel that it impacts the outcomes in situations where police presence is necessary? 76% said yes, 4% no, and 20% said somewhat. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, I'll turn it over to Penelope, who's going to be fielding some of these great questions you all have in the chat. And thank you so much for remaining on mute and for staying with us tonight. Penelope?
Yes, so thank you. And I also want to thank the audience for being patient with us. I am getting a lot of private questions. And so as we go along, I'm finding that we are answering some of those. However, I do have some questions that have been sent to me privately. So thank you for your patience with that. So one of our viewers is asking, I'm curious about what happens when you are in a remote location and you get pulled over by an unmarked car. If you don't feel safe and you suspect that they are not really cops, can or should you go to a more public area, or will that still be evasion?
I don't care whether it's evasion or not. Get your butt up out of there. You don't even know if they're cops. They're in an unmarked car. You can't identify who they are. The problem comes in right there is you cannot identify whether they're a cop or not. So that right there plays a role. You can evade me all day. I would get out of there. And I wouldn't be driving 10 miles an hour either.
Gotcha. So I had one question that you kind of answered already, but I want to follow it up by a comment that's in the comment box. So someone had asked about removing a bag without saying anything. Can you just reach in and grab it? And you kind of answered the question in that there is you have to have a search warrant. But then someone followed up with a question with a comment that says in New Jersey, if you have probable cause and you can, because you can search a vehicle, the most common example is a motor vehicle stop. The officer may smell marijuana and based on that, can ask you to get out of the car or search the car. And you don't need consent for that. Do you have any response for that comment?
That's in Jersey, Carol.
Yes, in New Jersey.
Carol, you on mute.
And so now, and they're searching the car for what?
Yeah,
If
so
they
I
had-
guess,
if
yeah.
if they have probable cause, like if they smell marijuana in the car, can they take you out in Jersey and search the car?
Right, so that's a typical scenario in New Jersey, and there's case law on it, which I suspect again may change now. That's our most common scenario. So obviously, when marijuana is illegal, they smell it in the car. They can ask everyone to get out and search the car for marijuana. Same thing when you're talking about earlier, like if they see a gun in plain view, they can ask everyone to get out and search the car if there's anything else in there. So you can, in New Jersey, there's case law on it that you can search a vehicle without consent if you have probable cause there to believe that there's something in the car. If you don't see anything, there's always bring the dog out, have the dog sniff the car. And then there's also the potential based on what your circumstances might be. You just want to take the car and impound it and then get a warrant and search it later. So you do have all those options, but under the case law right now, as it stands, if there's probable cause, you can search the car right there at the side of the road without consent.
Thank you, Jen, for your comment.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I have another question here. And this is based on the Camden model. So a viewer says that they're hearing good things about the Camden model, where police officers make a concerted effort to get to know the youth, hang out with them, and support them at games and have barbecues. And can the speakers comment on this model and how that may affect interactions with the police, either I guess vehicular or being stopped in general?
I think I don't know if that's the Camden model because I've been let's say 32 years altogether in law enforcement, and they had community outreach or community policing. And I was coming through the department, and so police did things with young people. They also interact with them. They did barbershop conversations. They've been doing that for a long time, and that is a good model because what you want to do is change the image of policing anywhere. So, especially with young people, older people are pretty set. Younger people are influenced, and you want to be able to let them know that what they might have heard is not you or your department or the police in that neighborhood. So, yeah, that's a good model, and everybody should have a community relations person, and every township and every police department should be out there reaching out to young people so that, matter of fact, recruit them to become police officers. Because, older ones go, younger ones come in, and if they see a positive image, they may look at that as something that they want to do. So yeah, every police department, that's a good model for everyone.
Great, thank you. So I believe we have more polling questions. Is that correct, Jessica?
Yeah, so we're going to go to our next polling question number 5. Do you think that a police officer's race matters who you have a police encounter, when you have a police encounter? Yes, no, somewhat. I'm going to be leaving it up for 10 more seconds. Okay. 50 participants responded out of 62. 54% said yes, 28% said no, and 24% said somewhat. Thank you.
I see Delacey Davis had, Dr. Davis had something in the chat about that Camden model, where he said that he was recently on a panel with
Mhm.
many advocates and activists from Camden who are not celebrating the model. They have expressed that the police are engaging people that they feel comfortable with, but not with the boots on the ground folks.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so ladies, so based on what Dr. Davis has posed and the previous question that we asked for the survey, what can, should, or are a lot of communities in our area doing to help with cultural competency with officers? Because I think that plays a dynamic role in how the interactions happen between race and community. And also, I have a question from someone in the chat who wanted us to clarify that last survey question. So can we get some clarity to that survey question?
So the
About
last survey,
race, about race, does it
Yes.
matter about the race of the officers?
Yes.
Mhm.
I think the race of the officers makes a huge difference, which ties into what you're talking about, the cultural competency.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a predominantly African-American and Latino community, and the dominance of the department is Caucasian. So culturally, do they understand either the needs of that community, how to police that community, how to even engage with that community? You know, not just come in and in a lot of the communities to be this occupying force of law enforcement, but to engage with that community.
I'm from Philadelphia, so we have a huge police department and we have a whole lot of divisions. I think that question was meaning, I agree with Delacey that it means the service. Race plays a major role in the service that is given to different communities. Yes. And so when you're talking about those that, whether that model is a good model, that model is a great model if it's even, if it's done evenly across all the communities within your city. That means all of them. Don't pick and choose which one. You're going to go up in the suburbs and get them, but you're not going to come down to other areas and do the same thing. If it's evenly across all the divisions or all the neighborhoods within the city, then it's a great model.
And how do you say it, Dr. Davis? You have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that's what happens in a lot of the communities. They really aren't comfortable in the communities that they're servicing. And I can speak very honestly from the community I come from. Trenton is an urban community. The dominance of the department, the department is white male dominated. And the majority of those that are policing the city, they're not from the city. Now that's a requirement. I'm just telling you what I know. I was a detective in internal affairs with the Trenton Police Department, and we did backgrounds on every individual who was a candidate for coming on the police force. And the majority, and I'm telling you, the majority of the officers did not live in Trenton. Now they said they did. They got an address, you know, to accommodate what civil service says you must do, which is to be a resident in order to come on the force. And as soon as they graduated, they went back to their prospective communities where they graduated high school and where they lived. So it's about an understanding. When you live in a particular town and you hear shots fired 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, if you're a police officer in that town, you have a genuine interest. You have a genuine concern and a genuine feel of what that community is dealing with and what that community is going through. But when you live in the suburb or you live down in a rural community that's about an hour away from the city that you're policing, you don't get all that. You don't get that feel. So that cultural sensitivity training needs to be implemented and needs to be within police departments. That should be a mandatory piece for you just to get an idea and a feel of how to even engage and police a community that does not look like you.
And when you add on to that training, let's note that the people that are coming in to do the training need to really be people from those neighborhoods that they need to train in policing. They need to really get it from those that experience different situations coming from the police, and not just hire a professor from off somewhere else that's not a part of the base of the community and not allow the community to come in there and have a conversation with the police and help train them on being sensitive about their neighborhoods and what they deal with.
And it's about community engagement, about the police engaging the community. It's finding out what the community needs are. And I think if that happens, the police would have a better feel and a better understanding on how to police in these particular neighborhoods. What are the needs of the youth? How are you engaging with the youth? What do the youth have to be a part of that community? How are you engaging with the entire community on a positive note? Not just this occupying force that's coming in and locking people up and arresting people.
Thank you so much for your response. Jessica does have another survey question to get to, so I will hand that back over to Jessica.
Okay, thank you, Penelope. So I'll be launching our 6th question of the night. Are you more or less inclined to call the police when you have an issue that most people would normally call the police to address? More inclined, less inclined? And I'll leave the survey up for 30 more seconds. Okay, 44 answered out of 62. 59% said they were more inclined and 41% said they were less inclined. And here are the results. Thank you. Back to you, Penelope.
Thank you. I have another question. What are your feelings about defunding the police?
Not a good idea.
That's like the latest fad out there.
That's not a good idea. That's not a good idea.
I don't think most people who say the word defund the police know what it means. It's too many definitions or meanings for defunding the police. It's just too many out there. If you really want to say you need more money for community events or community engagement, or you need more money for those who are professionals to deal with certain kind of situations within the city that the police respond to, then you may want to divert some funds from that budget to those situations. When people scream out defund the police, they do not want that. Because there are people who wants to destroy neighborhoods and hurt people. And they're going to exist. So tell me, when you defund the police, who's going to deal with them? There are bad people out there. So I don't think they really understand the meaning or the wording of defunding the police. Let's do some diversion of funds to things to help stop gun violence in your communities, or help youth get educated, help build up the schools, or help families deal with issues of poverty. Let's divert some funds to those things that help bring on crime in our neighborhoods. And because defunding the police, you don't know.
You don't want them working less for you. You want them to work more for you and with you. And it's gonna take all of us. And this is not just on the police. The community has to realize that they also have a responsibility. They have a responsibility to their own personal neighborhoods and communities. But you know, it's incumbent upon the police, and this is really in marginalized communities, more urban communities, that they really haven't been dealt a fair hand by the police. And this is historical. This isn't just coming about now. This has historically been going on for years. And it would be incumbent upon police departments to be able to say, you know, we want to work with the community, and be able to extend the olive branch and try to what we're talking about now, bridging that gap between the police departments and the communities. You know, my question is, how much do you really care about the community? Do you even want to have a relationship with the people within the community? And like Rochelle alluded to, and Dr. Davis alluded to, don't just pick and choose. Don't pick and choose of who you're going to have a relationship with. You have to have a relationship with everybody. Bring on people from the community to help you even make decisions on what it is you're going to be doing in our community.
Got it.
How do you just give us, you know, that's like you have an ailment and just, here, take this, and I don't know that it's even going to work for me. You can't tell me what's going to work for me. Doctor may be giving me something and I'm allergic to it. Oh, but because the label says this is good for this cancer, you need to take it. But I'm allergic to what's in it.
Exactly.
So work with me and find out what is it that we're thriving for, that we're even asking for. What is it that we want? And I think all communities just want to be treated fairly. They want to be everything distributed evenly across the board.
Yes.
We can go dive deeper even into police departments. You know, the disparities are everywhere. Even with the police, there's disparities within the departments. And it's about fair and equal treatment. No one's asking for any special treatment. We just want to be treated fairly.
Yes.
And you want police to come into your communities. And again, that's that lens. How do we perceive our police departments? We just want equal treatment, fair treatment, and it's a responsibility amongst all of us. We all bear a load of responsibility.
Got it. Thank you.
Now-
Thank you so much, ladies. Lori?
Penelope, can I ask I want to just ask a quick question to Rochelle and Carol. In your respective communities, are there any, have you seen a successful connection or effort in your own communities that was able to build a relationship with the police department and the people they serve? And if so, what did that look like?
Well, in Philadelphia, since we have about 28, 29 districts and different parts of the city, each captain in their own division or in their own district has to have a community outreach officer. And their function is to have events, community meetings to build that relationship between the police and the community. Some communities work well. Some communities, because of the past relationship with police, it's not working at all. So those efforts need to be made more. It all depends on who, because the people who have been damaged the most by police is people that look like me. And so in order to basically change that, there has to be a whole lot of effort in changing how police interact with us. So that's what I said. In some communities, it's worked well, and some communities, it's not. And they have to think out of the box to figure out how to get that working.
I'm very big, Lori, on actually, and we got to kind of dial back a little bit. And I'm huge on recruitment and having the departments, in order to have that collaboration, having the department look more like the community. And in order to do that, you should have officers that already look like the community out trying to recruit, again, pulling young people. The urban community, young people in urban communities, they don't want to be police officers. And I've had those conversations when I was a police officer. I've been removed from the police department for a long time. I've been retired now for 10 years. So what relationship they have now, I'm like the emoji right now. But to recruit, to get more officers within those communities that look like the community, and to build relationships, even if you don't look like the community, build that relationship. Police officers are within a community sometimes more than they are with their own personal families. They work hours and hours and hours in a particular community. How can you not build a relationship with the people in a neighborhood that you're always patrolling? What I'm asking, my question would be, what does it hurt to just get out of your car and just go up to some people that might be on their porch and say, hey, how y'all doing today? Or you may say, what's going on? They'll look at you, ain't nothing going on, officer. Oh, okay, I just wanted to see how everybody was doing. Just break that ice. That comes over so well. It'll blow their minds. So it's about really building relationships. If you want to get better, you want to bridge this gap, you've got to get up close and personal with people. And again, get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. Because where you have lack of knowledge, you will tend to fear. So take that off the board and just get out, and we're all human. Just have a conversation. You'll be surprised what you get back.
Let's say, just to give you a little bit, I was the president of the Guardian Civic League, which is a Black police civic organization, for 14 years as an active police officer. And one of the missions is to build that bridge between the community and police. So we used to have all these events in the community and cookouts. We used to come to Newark, New Jersey every year for the Kwanzaa Festival. I used to take about 2 or 3 busloads to Newark, New Jersey to the Kwanzaa Festival, bring young kids so they can see different things and do different things. So if you want to change things that's going on, you got to think out of the box and do something different.
Yes.
One of the other things I did was, I'm in the neighborhood that you can call the hood that I grew up in. And once they convinced me, and I'm a hard convincer to be a police officer because I did not like cops. But once they convinced me to come on to change, to be the change that I wanted to see, I went back and recruited other people from my neighborhood. So I know about 60, 75 people that I grew up with that because of me became police officers in the city. So we got to be the change we want to see.
Thank you.
Great. So I have a question from one of our viewers. The Attorney General has announced that municipalities can relax the civil service testing requirement in order to hire more local candidates. Do the panelists have an opinion on that?
Mm.
You said relax it.
Yes.
So
Look at Carol.
You know, as
When they say that, it all depends on the situation here. What are you going to relax? That's the first thing we want to know.
so basically,
Mhm.
and hearing you say that, Penelope, asking that question,
Mhm.
I take that as what he wants to do is remove the restriction of you having to reside in that particular town to become that police officer. Because I know what happens is because they can't get so many candidates from a particular city or township, now they widen the net and go countywide. So they pull off of a county list. So it's basically about widening the net in order to get good candidates. Like I said, I was a detective in internal affairs. We did background checks on candidates coming through to come on to the police department. I can tell you, maybe out of 100, if we had 100 candidates, we may, by the time we finish through all of the background, we might wind up maybe with 40. I'm just throwing that number out like that, being that we lose more than we gain. Out of 100, we don't come up with 80 good candidates. Nope. By the time we finish, and especially getting to the criminal background or getting through them, did you have any domestic violence or anything like that? By the time we finish with that, the number is squashed so low. So I think that's what they're talking about with the AG wanting to relax it and
Mhm.
just, I don't know how much wider they would make it unless they would make it statewide throughout the state and say that you can apply anywhere within the state
Mhm.
to, apply for a particular police department. And again, what does that do about the sensitivities or the understandings of someone who lives way in I'll point out nothing bad, Lori, about Ocean County, but way down in Ocean or Cape May County to come up to Mercer and be a police officer in Trenton. I mean, how well does that work?
I don't think it works well at all.
That was really a rhetorical question, my sister.
I'm like, in this city.
I wasn't asking that question. I
Right.
think I know the answer to that one.
In this city, the fact that people who did not live here grew up here, they did that. They widened it so that people could come from out of the city, and that was a problem. Because people do not care about where they live, where they worked, unless they lived there.
Live there.
So you want them to be able to live and work there so they can care about the city that they live and work in.
That's right.
Yep. As far as relaxing, I don't do this, but since marijuana is becoming legal all over the place, you may want to stop from past arrests for a little bit of marijuana as keep them from coming on the job. You may want to cancel at 17. They had a little incident and they may have stole something out of the store because they was hungry. You may want to stop keeping that against them. You want little infractions that hold people back, especially us, forever, to relax it on that avenue. So those who may have made a little mistake can have the opportunity to do this. If they made it once and they haven't done anything, that means they adjusted and changed, and give them the opportunity to be able to do this. I'm not for out of the neighborhood stuff because we dealt with that here and that was not good.
Thank you. Thank you for that reply. So another question was, let me go back to our questions. How do you feel about police officers in schools?
Well, they're there. They have the school resource officers. I was a school resource officer. And again, I'm strong on building relationships. And I did that with those young people. Now, again, it's up to each individual municipality and each officer. Every school resource officer is not a good school resource officer. I can tell you that right now. That's their one place they can hang out, they can hide out, they can relax. You know, they can, but what are they doing? And the question becomes, what is their purpose in the school? What's their purpose in that school? When I was a school resource officer, I actually was teaching the curriculum that probably most on this webinar is familiar with, which is the DARE program. And I also taught the GREAT program. If you're not familiar with GREAT, GREAT is the acronym for Gang Resistance Education and Training. So those two programs as a school resource officer, that's why I was in there. And also pre-K through 12th grade, well, pre-K through 3rd grade, I'm sorry. I taught the officer friendly, the stranger danger program. So of course that's starting from pre-K, teaching them, you know, the do's and the don'ts with the strangers, all of that, up to 3rd grade, then the GREAT and the DARE from 3rd all the way up to 12th grade, all the way into the high school. So what is the purpose? I throw back the question, what is the purpose of the officer actually being there? With each department, when they put the officer in there, what is that officer actually doing? Are they just hanging out? Because I didn't just hang out in the halls and just be there as just that presence. I actually went into classrooms and taught a curriculum, taught a program.
I'm in agreement with that. They should have a purpose, but you should, in order to work in schools, you need to love children. Because y'all know how those little children are in those schools. I know you've been there. You know your little May is not always pleasant. Let's be real with that. So if you are going to work in a school, you need to love children. You really do. I couldn't work in the school. Not that, it's not like I don't love children. I just don't like everybody's children. So if you're going to work in the school, you need to love children. You can be a cop and love children and have a purpose. That's an excellent motive.
Thank you, ladies. So I have a question from the audience who was actually in the program we had last week. And last week we discussed training programs for the police and other frontline rescue individuals to help them safely care for our mentally ill autistic family members. How widespread are these programs throughout New Jersey as well as nationally?
I'm sorry, can repeat the question, Penelope?
So how widespread are the programs that police and other frontline rescue individuals to help safely maneuver through mentally ill and autistic family members? How widespread are these programs throughout New Jersey as well as nationally, and how have they been working? What has that have other models look like?
Well, what I can say, I do know that I can speak to Autism New Jersey, and I'm you know, just pulling that out the hat. They, at their conference annually, they have a breakout session that is actually taught by a police officer on how to deal with children that have disabilities. It was kind of unfortunate that we weren't able to get that particular officer on. We tried, but he had another engagement and couldn't assist us, and he would have been perfect, you know, to answer this question. But the information is out there. And like I said, from Autism New Jersey, that's one entity that I do know of that, you know, could assist them with that information. Nationally, I can't answer that question for you. I'm sorry.
Penelope, if I could just jump into that, anyone that wasn't on last week, for questions that are relating to mental health and law enforcement, please check out last week's webinar. It still is on YouTube, right, Jessica? You can find it on there. where we did talk about police training, involvement of the police forces, what it takes for them to get trained, effectively trained. You can also, if you're looking for national information, you can always check with NAMI, which is a national organization, that they may have some statistics for you. But I would encourage anyone that does have questions related to mental health law enforcement to please check out our webinar from last week.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you. So I have another question. If female police officers shoot less than male officers, what do you think that male officers can learn from female officers?
How to communicate.
Mm.
You took that right out of my mouth. I couldn't even get off the mic fast enough.
Just how to communicate, they talk about being, just fast at the trigger, and we're not. Female police officers are very good communicators, and we know how to talk and kind of just calm situations.
Mhm.
That's it for me. That's it in a nutshell. Just to be able to hone in and communicate with somebody. I mean, I've been in big, hairy, just wild domestic, like, and I just came in and been able to just separate those combatants and just calm everybody down. And it's about communication.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, everyone who is joining in, I want to thank you so much for being patient with getting to your questions. I have private questions and I have public questions. So I'm just trying my best to get through these. So thank you so much for being patient. One of the questions I do have is that one of the viewers has asked, my high school has a gun violence club and is relating to the topic about gun violence and defunding the police. Do you have any advice about abolishing the rights of gun violence?
I'm not clear on that question.
Yeah, so I'm not clear on that either, but
Abolishing gun violence. We don't want gun violence. I don't think anybody does. So I'm not really clear on what they are trying to ask, but
yes.
I don't know.
I don't think anybody wants any gun violence at all. Are they trying to ask about abolishing just guns, period? Or?
Yeah, I think really that's what it was about, the just monitoring how guns are issued and monitoring that violence and that in that context of guns and gun control.
I'm for gun control, most definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Too many people that can get guns that don't know what to do with them, and anger triggers people into using those guns unlawfully. So I'm good for gun control. There need to be some. I'm not saying abolish all guns because I'm a gun owner. So can't do that one. I need to protect my family in case those people come try to storm my house.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So another question. So how did you find your voices as vocal Black women in law enforcement, and what engaged you and inspired you to become part of the justice system, the police system, and being officers? And how was that helping you with in this context of this talk?
When I first came on the police department, like they talk about being green as a Granny Smith apple. I just thought everybody, I'm like Rodney King, everybody was gonna get along. We all gonna get along and I'm gonna fit right in. And that didn't happen because it started for me really at the academy level. Again, having a label. So I was labeled in the academy because, I was really low tolerance for the nonsense. I was there to do what I was supposed to do, get through the academy, come upstairs, be a police officer, and thinking that I was just going to be getting along with all my fellow police officers. Once again, nope, that didn't happen. So once you get in and get the flow of things, and you really start seeing what's really going on, you know, I call law enforcement, and there may be some people on this webinar that may not take kindly to what I'm saying, but it's like a gated community. Law enforcement is gated. And what a lot of people don't see is what goes on the inside. And they are really believing in that blue code of silence. Well, that can be broken because it does exist. It truly does exist. So with all that I saw and all that I experienced made me vocal. There was no way I could stay silent with what I saw was going on, with what I experienced myself and what I saw was going on in the community that I lived in. I lived in the community. I policed that same community. And I could not stand by and watch anything that was unjust happen to anybody. It didn't matter, and it did not matter what color you were. It didn't matter. Just to mistreat people, that wasn't going to happen. And in policing, that can go rampant. And it's not across the board. There are good cops. But then you have those that take advantage of the whole uniform, the whole aura of being a police, and figuring they have carte blanche to just do anything to anybody, anywhere. And then after it's done, I think I told you before, the majority of them don't live in the city. They leave. And the effect, and this is a whole nother webinar, now the effect of the trauma is left on the people in the community. So the things that happen in that community, and I belong, like Rochelle did, belong to a Black police officers organization within the police department. It's called BOLS, acronym for Brother Officers Law Enforcement Society. And we were very vocal and very outspoken within the community, speaking for our community and for the officers on our department, the Black officers, because believe me, the mistreatment was inside the entity as much as it was out in the community. So we had it twofold. We had to deal with it from the inside, and then we had to deal with it, you know, out in the community. So and you have to know that, and I can only speak my truth. I can only speak my experience, and that's my truth, and I lived through it. And I'm not living as a victim. I'm not saying it's one of the best things that happened to me, but it was okay, because what has happened to me strengthened me, and it made me stronger to not have that fear and to speak up and to stand strong and stand my grounds on, yep, this is my story, my truth through my lens. And I'm going to stay that way and just stay vocal. But again, you don't have to, we can, the saying goes, we can disagree without becoming disagreeable. And that's what all of us have to understand. Mm-hmm. You know, your lens is going to be so different, especially if you don't look like me.
Let me just I'll make mine's really brief since Carol took up all the minutes. I didn't like police coming up because of what I saw. People convinced that got on the force convinced me to come be part of the change. What makes you vocal and make you an advocate is that you cannot adjust to people doing wrong. You either got to speak up and step up, or you'll be trampled over and become a part of something that's just not correct. So my thing, what got me into it is because I could not stand there and watch people doing anything wrong when you're thinking you're joining something to do what's right. So yeah, you are labeled. My name was Angela Davis. They saw me coming, they be like, here she come. Of course, because you're not going to do it in front of me. If I set the precedent, if I set it, that's how it's going to be.
Mhm.
The police officers that go along to get along should stand up against wrong and not worry about whether people are going to back you, not worry about people going to support you, because you know your self-worth. You know what you're worth. You know who you are as a person. That person that does right stands up for what's right, regardless of what people may attempt to do.
Thank you so much, ladies. If do you have any other words of wisdom? Anything that you would like to share with the audience for the evening?
I'm just looking at something right now, Penelope, just real quick, for someone who asked, do officers within the school receive mental health training geared specifically towards children? I don't know about specifically towards children, but for that question, for that individual, just know that the Attorney General has, there was a bill, and we talked about this on our last week's webinar. The Attorney General has put out a bill where it's going to be mandated that throughout the state of New Jersey, every police officer will receive mental health training.
They,
So, you know,
they offer mental health training here in this city for free. But let me just say this. I'm going to use one of my favorite actresses that says this. Her name is Angela Bassett. She said, you are moving towards your purpose when you don't even know what it is yet.
you want to leave with a quote?
I'm going to drop the mic.
So I will leave with a quote. People may forget what you say. People may forget what you do, but they will never forget the way you made them feel.
Exactly.
Dr. Maya Angelou.
Yes.
And that's for all of
Absolutely.
us. That's for all of law enforcement, for citizens. You can say something to somebody, you can do something to somebody, but how did you really make them feel? Take that home and let that marinate.
Yes.
Thank you, Carol.
Yes. Thank you so much, Carol, Rochelle, Lori, Jessica. I want to thank everyone here for joining us tonight. There is an evaluation that's going to be posted in the chat. So please take a moment to fill out the evaluation so we could better serve you. Join us next month for parts 3 and 4 to this series. Take a Walk in My Shoes on March 2nd, where we will discuss experiences and perceptions of law enforcement and the community, followed by the talk on March 9th and the discussion that parents and caregivers have with their children about law enforcement. You could reach out to us. We'll also put our email addresses in the chat box as well. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you again so much for coming this evening, and we look forward to next month's webinars. Thank you so much.